Hello everyone, my name is Matteo Vallone and I work in the Google Play Apps and Games business development team. Welcome. In my day-to-day job, I work with some of the most successful apps and games developers. And I always think that there's lots to be learned by apps developers by looking at how successful games developers are built. What are the key things that games developers care about when they actually build their games for success? In the next 30-40 minutes, I'll try to answer that question by showing you some of the key metrics that they look at and how they go about and optimize for them. I will also try to extrapolate some rules that you as app developers can take in your day-to-day job and hopefully use to optimize your apps, and also show you some examples of how these learnings have been applied by app developers successfully. But before doing that, I want to address the elephant in the room right away. Apps and games are not exactly the same. Actually, one key difference is that it's much harder to make money on apps than it is on games. And for the purpose of this talk, the main difference here is that games enjoy much more flexibility when it comes to monetizing. That's because if you think about it, a game is a virtual world with virtual currency and items. So basically there are endless possibilities in terms of what games developers can put together as monetization mechanics, bundles, and price points. While app developers have less flexibility. They're actually limited by the services and the goods that they are trying to sell within their app. And so less flexibility, less granularity. But there's also lots of common ground. And the main key thing in common is the business model. For most apps and games, the business model is a freemium model. And if you share that business model, the equation you see here on the right should always be true. Your cost per install, your CPI, should always be lower than the lifetime value of the users that you bring in. And lifetime value is a function of retention, engagement, and monetization. Now, in a world where there's more competition for user acquisition and store visibility, the CPI is actually rising for everyone, for both apps and games. And that means that to make this equation work, you really need to focus on the right side of it, the lifetime value, and those key metrics that drive the lifetime value. And among this, really, it all starts with retention. Retention is king. These data from mobile intelligence company Quetra show you why. These are average retention curves of apps, of games on the left and apps on the right. They are ranked by daily active users. So you see the blue line represents the top 10 apps in the world by daily active users. The red line is top 50, yellow line top 100, and green line is top 5,000. You see how better retention always drives better performance. And games developers know this very well. They actually, before even launching their game, before investing in user acquisition, they spend a lot of time and resources optimizing their game for this key metric. This process is called soft launching. They launch in a few test markets or to a beta community, and they really spend time tracking how this retention works for their game and change their games to the point where they're comfortable with the retention curves they see, where they think that this retention can support that lifetime value equation that I showed you before, and so that they can actually invest profitably in user acquisition. This process is very rigorous and it requires a lot of attention, but it ensures that only the resources are only invested in the right products. As a matter of fact, lots of games get killed in this process, also high visibility ones, so actually some of them never see the light just because they don't have good retention. If you want to measure retention, you can do so with Firebase Analytics. You have a retention report that shows you not only your retention curve on the top, but also your retention stats by cohorts of users that installed your app in a given day. So you can also track how, as you release new versions of your app and people install them, how retention change and hopefully improves as you optimize for retention. All right, so lots of common ground, retention is king, but I want to share with you 3 key rules that you can take from games developers and hopefully use to optimize your apps. The first one is focusing on the engagement cliff. What I mean by engagement cliff is shown by the same chart I showed you before from Quetra, the retention curves here. The thing that they didn't highlight before if you look at it, is that the biggest drop in retention happens in the first 7 days. No matter how successful the app is, you see that that's where retention really drops dramatically. After that, all curves tend to flatten. So really, the apps that are doing a better job in terms of retention are doing that in the first 7 days. That's where you win. Now, depending on what type of app you have, your day 7 average retention can vary. You see here on the right, average retention, day 7 retention for different categories of apps. So it varies between 40% for news and magazines to 15% for photography. But that means that between 60% and 85% of users are lost in those first 7 days. So clearly, lots of impact in addressing those first 7 days. And that's because users download lots of apps, and they try them. And during those first few experiences, they actually decide whether they want to keep using them, or otherwise they forgot about them. Sometimes they uninstall them. So really addressing that specific experience that is between learning about your app, being comfortable with it, and deciding to actually keep using it is the most important part. Games know this very well. They actually face a very steep engagement cliff, which is you have to learn how the game works. You have to learn new rules, you have to learn new mechanics, you have to understand why you should go through all these challenges. You need to care about it also. And that part of the experience is normally the tutorial. Games spend a lot of resources and time optimizing the tutorial because they know how critical it is. I want to play a video, an extract of a video that we shot with Pixelberry, who's a very successful game developer that is particularly good with their tutorials. They have more than 75% of users that start one of their tutorial actually complete them. So let me play the video here.
Players coming in, we hit them with story right away. And we try and do it in a way where it's a little more natural. We are cognizant that a lot of people playing games on mobile phones may not want to read too much text. So we try to ease players into that. But by the time they finish our tutorial, we're hoping that they're already caught up in the lives of these characters and they want to learn more about their backstories and what's going on.
I think it is important to give people kind of that sense of progression in a game, especially in mobile games, because I think with a lot of games you can reach a certain point where you're just repeating the same actions and you want to feel like you're doing something different. I think story is a great way of differentiating that and saying, oh, now you're dealing with a new villain, or now you're dealing with a new issue that's come up.
So they talk about two key things. One is the story. The story for their game is the key element, the key value that you should care about when you play this game. And they want to make sure that you start experiencing the story from the first experience. Why should the player care about this game? The second thing they talk about is progression. The sense of progression that should always be present in games. And if you think about it, this goes beyond the tutorial. It's actually what a game is. It always presents you with a new challenge. That challenge, though, shouldn't be too challenging, otherwise you're frustrated and you leave the game, but also it shouldn't be too easy, otherwise you get bored and you also leave the game. And so games think a lot about that, and this is an example of how they look at it. Playdots, another successful game developer, built this chart for their game called 2 Dots. And the chart is lots of dots. And those dots are actually levels in the game. And those levels are mapped along 2 variables. One is the revenue per player in that specific level, and the other one is the lapse rate in that level. So how many people left the game in that level. This gives you an idea of how frustrating and challenging the level is, and also how actually engaging and how much people actually want to spend money in that level. By optimizing the difficulty level of the levels, below the red line, they actually managed to improve not only conversion, but also average revenue per paying user. So progression is very important. But this is very specific to games. So let's try to extrapolate some learnings for apps. Climbing the engagement cliff is all about recognizing that those first 7 days are very important and also quite difficult for a user to go through them. there's lots of things happening, and really the value of your app is not clear to them yet. So the first thing you should focus on is finding that key feature that without much engagement provides value to the user, something that can give them a wow effect or something that can convince them that they should stick around. And it shouldn't require too much for them to actually unlock that. So present that straight away. The second thing is defining those activation moments, those things, those steps in that engagement cliff that you need the user to go through. It could be signing in, uploading something about themselves, adding some friends, whatever key action, activation moment you need them to do to fully unlock the value of your app and start using it to its full potential. Those are the activation moments. You should make sure at that point that those are presented gradually, with a gradual investment from a user perspective, so that the user is not overwhelmed. They feel this sense of progression. They're going in a direction. They understand why you're asking them to do these things, and they're actually gradually unlocking the value of your app. As part of that, for example, if you're requiring them to sign in, you should treat that as a service. You should show them the value of doing that before asking them to do it. This is, again, in that sense of progression, that unlocking that value, showing them the value first, and then asking them to do something. Also, if you have paywalls, you should carefully manage the appearance of them in those first 7 days. Again, the user doesn't really know exactly the full value of your app yet. You probably don't want to overwhelm them and ask them about paying until they're fully comfortable with the app and they've actually unlocked the full value. You can optimize along these lines using, again, Firebase Analytics. The funnel report here can help you. In the funnel report, you can create any custom event that you want. It could be signing in, uploading a photo, whatever process, activation moment you need the user to go through can be defined in the funnel report, and you can track how many users start that process or task and complete it. So you can also put them in a sequence and see as a funnel where the user gets stuck. You can see how many people started one action, the second action, the third action, and identify those roadblocks that stop them from actually going through all of them. So very powerful tool. And now I want to show you a couple of examples of apps that have implemented this rule successfully in their app. The first one is OkCupid. OkCupid is a dating app. Dating apps are a great example of engagement cliff because before you can actually use a dating app, you have to do lots of things. You have to sign in, you have to write something about yourself, you have to upload a photo of yourself, you have to answer some questions in some case, like in OkCupid case, and you have to start liking people. So lots of things. And OkCupid recently redesigned their whole onboarding experience to make it more gradual and step by step. Also, they made each task more enjoyable, skippable, and they provided good positive feedback to the user as they went through these tasks. Again, enhancing this sense of progression that the user had to feel to actually complete these tasks. As a result, they got 21% better day 7 retention. This means that after 7 days, they had 20% more users. Same cost per install. After 7 days, they had 20% more users. How they did this? This is how it looked like before the redesign. So you see they're asking you to write something about yourself, to upload a photo, to answer some questions. And this is all presented in a series of modal windows with no clear sequencing. Also, if you start one of these activities, for example, answering the question, you see here the questions. You see here on the right, those are presented in a all together, doesn't look very fun to go through all of them. It's quite actually overwhelming. This is how it looks after the redesign. The first and only thing you need to care about after you sign in is answering those 5 questions. You have to answer one by one, and it's easy and nice to go through of them. You swipe right to say yes, you swipe left to say no. Once you have completed this task, only then you're asked to upload a photo. You can do it or skip it, but that's the only thing you need to care about. And after that, you can start enjoying the app. You can browse and start getting familiar with it. and you already have done part of what you need to do to actually be able to use it. But also they remind you of the other things that you should do in order to fully unlock the value. In this case, start liking 5 people so that their algorithm can better match you with people that you might like. All right, that wasn't one example. The other example is Freeletics. Freeletics is a fitness app, and I think that's probably the best example of an engagement cliff. When you download a fitness app, you're probably not doing fitness yet. So the fitness app needs to convince you to go to the gym and actually do fitness. It's not enough if you just download the app, right? So that's the first key challenge. The second challenge is between you, when you download the app and you actually go to the gym to use your app, there might be some time in between. And what do you do with the app? And in those days that you're not going to the gym, you might forget about it, or you might find another app, right? So how do you keep users engaged in that time frame? And that's common to other verticals, but definitely fitness is a good example of that. Freeletics address these challenges by making sure that their onboarding experience felt more personal from the first minute you started. You're building some key attainable goal that is personalized based on your input, and that you feel more empowered to actually go and achieve. As a result, they obtained 47 better day one retention. So almost 50% more users after the first day kept using the app. How they did that, this is how it looked before their redesign. So basically you download the app, you get a few cards of what the app does, and right after you are asked to sign in. And after signing in, you're asked to opt in their newsletter. After that, you're considered a registered user, and you can start browsing the app, understanding what it does for you, and taking next steps, basically. What they did is introducing this. After those first few cards that I show you, the photos about the app, the thing they do is they ask you, are you a male or a female? Let's start understanding who you are. And once you answer that first question, they start personalizing the appearance of the rest of the screen. So if you're a male, you see male picture. If you're a female, you see a female picture. And then they ask you, what's your fitness level? They also tell you why they're asking you this. It's because they're starting to know you. They're starting to learn about what you care about so that they can build your first workout experience. Clear value, they're treating this information as a service for you, and they're giving you a sense of progression. Third step is what's your goal? Do you want to lose weight? You want to build muscles? Why do you want to do fitness? After that, only after that, you're asked to sign in. Now you understand the value of signing in. You're storing this information and you're allowing them to build your personal workout experience. Much more different than just asking people to sign in without knowing why I should sign in, right? Then they ask you if you want to join their newsletter, but again, you understand why now. They're going to send you personal recommendation based on your goals to your inbox. After that, the last thing you see is a screen, feedback screen that tells you that they're actually building your first workout experience. So again, it's much more compelling to go through the first experience of this app, even if you're not at the gym, because you're doing something in that direction. There is a progression toward that first gym experience. The other thing, and also after this, you feel that you have some goal, and probably you're more motivated to actually go to the gym and do it. And actually this can be seen in the impact that they had also on day 3 retention, which was 17% better than the previous version. So even after this first experience, the people were actually using the app more, and that's probably because they were more motivated to go to the gym and actually do what you do with a fitness app, which is fitness. All right, that was onboarding, and hopefully at this point your users are retained, onboarded, and they understand the value of your app, and you want to monetize them. The next 2 rules are about that. The first one, embracing your app's multiple personality disorder. This is what I mean by that. This is an average revenue distribution curve for an average game. No matter how successful a game is, lots of people will not spend a dime in it. And even among the ones that spend, there are very different amounts that they're going to spend. A big segment might spend very little, a small segment might spend lots of money, and then there are other segments in between. recognizing, understanding what each user is gonna potentially spend in your game and how they like to spend, what is the value perception that they have, what is their propensity to spend, and targeting them based on what you know about them with special custom in-app purchase offers. That's the key to achieve much better conversion and revenue per user. This is an example of how a game developer looks at this. This is Wooga, and it's just one way to look at it. They segment their users along two variables. One is progression in the game, and the other one is spending level. So for each segment, you see in blue, they have different way to target them, different offers that they can trigger for that specific segment. For example, if you're a new player, they offer you a starter pack. Now, if you buy this, you become an early spender. You're not just a new player, you're someone who spends early. And they try to upsell with some other offer. If you buy that, then you become an early heavy spender. You're in a different segment now, and they might target you with a different offer. If you don't buy, you might become a mid spender. So later in the game, they know which steps you took, and they will target you with a different discounted offer based on that segment. If you don't buy, then you might become a late spender. So they will target later, even later in the game, with an even different offer. That's a very simple but very effective way to look at it. A more advanced and complicated but very effective way is this other example from SpaceApe. What they do is that they analyze their players' behavior in those first 7 days, and they predict the lifetime value that those users will bring to the game for the rest of their life in the game. And they look at how they spend, what they spend on, and also how they like to spend. And then they target them with different offers. By doing this, they achieve 2 times better conversion than having a one-size-fits-all approach. This is how it works. Players play. For the first 7 days, SpaceApe analyzes their behavior, their spending pattern, and based on their lifetime value models, they predict how much the value each user will bring to the game and how they like to spend. And they assign each user to a separate segment. Here you see an example, 2 segments, just to give you an idea. The first segment has medium lifetime value, but they actually spend a lot. Only they spend in one go, and they're not very frequent buyers. They might not spend again, or they will spend, but at a later stage, not very frequently. The second group, they spend less in a single instance, but they're more frequent. They're gonna keep coming and spending. So their lifetime value is higher. It's just that they like to spend in a different way. These 2 segments will see different offers in the game. The first one will see a big bundle with a very high price point, lots of value in it, but that's the way to convert these people. They're not scared about seeing a big price point, but they also want more value because they're not probably going to come back and spend later, and that's what you should focus on as a developer. Now, the second segment will see a much smaller bundle, and that will make them comfortable, and they will probably convert with that. But also, the developer knows that they will probably come back and buy more. So overall, their lifetime value will be higher. Okay, let's generalize and extrapolate some rules that you can take as app developers. You need to recognize that users will have a very different value perception of your app. And no matter how successful you are, no matter how relevant your app is, they will have a different propensity to spend, and also a different way to spend. If you can recognize that, segment your user base based on this, and target them with specific custom in-app purchase offers, then you can definitely achieve a much better conversion and revenue per user. You can use, again, Firebase to do that. First of all, you can use Firebase Analytics to build segments exactly like the one I showed you before. Here we use it to build a high lifetime value segment that actually has a very small single price point but frequent purchase behavior, and a medium lifetime value segment that has a high single price point but not frequent spend behavior. This is all done with Firebase Analytics using events and attributes that the users have. And based on this, you can track how they perform. Any chart in Firebase Analytics will show you these two different segments and how they behave, so you can better study them. But now what you can do, you can also target them with different offers using remote config in Firebase. The way it works, for example, let's say you sell a subscription. You're a newspaper or a fitness app and you sell a subscription. For the first segment, the one with high single spend points, but not very frequent, you can build a promotion for your annual subscription. These guys are comfortable spending a lot, but they don't want to be bothered every month. They will buy an annual subscription probably, so you can have an heavily discounted annual subscription for them. And for the other group, with a higher lifetime value but single price point lower, you can have a discount on a monthly subscription. So the price point will be lower, but they're more comfortable doing that, and you can target them with this offer. Again, it's very easy to do this with remote config. A couple of, you don't need to code, you just need to go through the options, and it will be very easy. This works on in-app purchases for virtual goods. It also works for physical goods. So if you have an e-commerce app, for example, this example applies to you. This is Wish, a very successful e-commerce app. And they basically show, in their stream, they show products to users that they think they might want to buy. And they also apply the same concept. They show less expensive items to users that have shown less engagement. Maybe they haven't bought anything yet. They started using the app, or they're just not that much engaged. And once they see that the users are more engaged, they spend maybe a couple of times, they start showing them more expensive products. Again, this proves that it works. As a result, they obtain 10% better conversion. All right. The last rule is selling umbrellas where and when it rains. It's basically not only about what you sell, umbrellas, but when and where you sell them. So the best way to describe this example is showing you what Playdots does. They recently redesigned their whole in-app purchase flow, and as a result, they obtain 10% better revenue per active user. So without changing their user base, they got 10% better revenues just by redesigning along these lines. And I'll show you what I mean here. So first thing, when you start a new level, you see how many boosters you have available for you. And they give you one button that you can use to purchase whatever boxes or boosters you need to finish that level. So you don't have to go in the store in the game and buy what you think you might need. They prompt you to buy, before you start the level, exactly what you need, and they show you what you already have. Similarly, when you die in a level, in this case you're running out of moves, they show you another call to action that says, why don't you buy those extra 5 moves that you need to finish the game, the level. So you don't have to quit the game, go to the store in the game and buy what you need. You can buy it now without having to quit the level that you're actually trying to finish. By only doing this, they got 6% more paying users by just adding these 2 call to actions. The other thing they did is they moved some some in-game items that you can purchase right into the UI of the game. So you don't have to quit the game. You can buy them as you play, whenever you want, with one tap. They're always there. By doing that, they got 5% better average revenue per user. So really, it's all about making purchasing easy, accessible, but also relevant. Positioning those in-app purchase, those products that you're selling exactly where you think that the user will need them, and triggering calls to action when you think that those are the most relevant, so that users are more compelled to actually purchase. The best example to show how this works in an app environment is TomTom. Last year they moved from a premium model, so you just had to pay for the app to use the app, to freemium. And in that transition, they got 2.4 more paying users. And that's because they thought very carefully about their business model, and they really implemented very well, especially along the lines of the rule I described you before. This is how it looks. It's very similar to the game I showed you before. You have 75 kilometers to use the app for free. After that, you have to upgrade. And upgrading means that you're basically buying what they used to sell before as a premium app. What they did is that they positioned that upgrade button in the UI of the app, and it's always there. No matter where you are, it's always one tap away. You also see the countdown of those kilometers that you have, 3 kilometers that you still have. So you also feel the urgency of upgrading if you're running out of kilometers. Very easy, very relevant. The other thing they did is they introduced some calls to action when they thought you would need to upgrade the most. For example, you start a new trip, and they know that you will run out of kilometers during that trip. They tell you, why don't you upgrade now? Instead of doing it while you're driving, you might not have a connection. So really, when you start an activity that they know is more likely to convert you, they prompt you to do it. Second, of course, they show you that call to action when you're actually running out of kilometers or you ran out. So those little things actually add up, and they're the ones that really make a freemium model successful. Another example, a bit more simple and maybe more applicable in most cases, is the subscription example. If you sell a subscription, normally with a subscription you unlock different features and content. And yes, you can offer that in your app, and you can have a list of all the things that subscription unlocks, but also showing the content and the feature in the flow of the app that are behind a paywall and prompting the user to upgrade when they're actually trying to access those is very impactful. This is what Buzooda does. It's a language learning app, and their subscription basically unlocks more content and more languages. And they started putting these calls to action with the button to actually go into the purchase flow when you're trying to access that content in those languages that are behind the paywall. And you see the result here. 30% better conversion with the premium content and 83% better conversion with the languages. So very impactful. All right, to wrap up, the 3 rules we talk about are climbing the engagement cliff, which is all about focusing on those 7 days after the users install the app. Understanding that those are the key moments where the user is still not comfortable with your app. Defining the activation moments you need them to go through, and making sure that those are presented gradually in the experience in the first 7 days, so that they are not overwhelmed, they feel a sense of progression, they understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they hopefully fully unlock the value of your app so that they might stick around for much longer. The second rule is about embracing your app's multiple personality disorder. Freemium model is all about lots of users wanting different things and having different value perception. Being able to segment them, understand what they want, and target them based on their segment will help you improve your conversion in a much more effective way than using a one-size-fits-all approach. The third rule we talk about is selling umbrellas where and when it rains, which means that it's not only about what you sell, but also how you sell it, and it makes a big difference. Making sure that the in-app purchases are presented in an easy way to access them, always at least 1 or 2 taps away from purchasing, and also triggering those call to action when you think those in-app purchases are most relevant for the user. So that was it. Thank you very much.